All right, so a very good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to your first lecture of Marine Ecology, Introduction to Marine Ecology. So for today's outlines, we will talk about ecological terminologies and concepts, where you will cover what is ecology, and more specifically marine ecology, and the different sciences within marine ecology. And then more specifically, we'll look into identifying abiotic and biotic factors. And this is where we'll be doing some class activities together. So what I'll be doing is doing this pre-recording so that you will have an idea of what you need to cover. But during our lab session or class session, you are expected to present in groups. So instead of just hearing from me, I get to hear your voices too. And then, of course, we'll talk about different levels of marine ecological organizations. But more specifically, we'll talk about it in detail in different lectures. And also later, we will look into the impact of abiotic factors towards an environment. But more specifically, it is you guys who's going to be checking out on what are the impacts of humans towards an ecosystem. So, from this, you'll be expected to understand key definitions and concepts to ecology, and to differentiate abiotic and biotic factors, to identify and describe abiotic factors and physical processes that influences marine ecosystems, and list ways humans interact with and impact ocean systems. So, are we ready, class? I really wish I could hear your voices, really, but I usually, yes, doctor, let's go. All right. So, very straightforward. What is ecology? So, it's a Greek work of oikos that means house. Eco stands for house. And of course, logy, understandably, is the study. So, of course, is the study of houses. And thus, the noun or the person in this sense who is studying this particular field is called an ecologist. So, what defines an eco and logy? So, based on the definition, logy, of course, is the scientific study. But with regards to eco, you have to elaborate it a little bit more deeper. So ecology being a house, all right, you have to convert it more specifically into the relationship between an organism and an environment. Remember in our outline we were going to talk about abiotic and biotic factors? So the organism is the biotic factor. The environment, well, it can constitute biotic factors, but of course, we are also looking at abiotic factors. Of course, those that are not living. And more importantly, without losing the keyword, is the relationship between abiotic and biotic. So the study of all of this is called ecology. Or another way of putting it is the branch of biology that deals with the relationship between organisms and physical surroundings. So what I'm trying to say is, no matter how much you want to play around with the words, however, you must always keep the keywords of when you have eco and logy. So, of course, logy stands for the study, and eco has to have the abiotic, the biotic factor, and of course, the relationship. And so, if it's ecosystems, of course, you already know what eco means, like in short, house, lit, and system, of course, is system, hence, is a system of houses. Now, it might be a very simple, straightforward lecture for now, right? But what I want you to keep in mind is that throughout my classes, at least with me, I want you to retain, not memorize, however, I want you to remember words so that rather than you having to memorize and then get confused over the course of time, you would start having pictorial memories of the importance of certain keywords and how you can elaborate it. So the whole idea of my course and why I have to give you tutorials is that I want to encourage you to understand more and relate more and apply it more rather than having to memorize your facts. Remember once upon a time in my invertebrate class, I actually tried to challenge you guys to try to do your own self-reading. Okay, so what I'm trying to do here is I'm slowly trying to make you independent in having you do your own self-reading. So no matter how much you want to write notes, whether you work well with mind maps or whatsoever, but I really want you to take on board, not just having to remember what marine ecology is, but the skill of having to understand your study better. Okay, so don't be overburdened, but again, It's just that you will be able to remember your work better. Good? All right. So let's go to the next slide. So of course, you know what ecology is, right? So if it's marine ecology, it's going to be very much easy. So of course, it's the scientific study of living things in the ocean and other related marine ecosystems. Of course, not forgetting the word marine. And how they interact with the environment. You see? So it's not confusing at all. You don't even have to memorize this. Once you understand the foundation of what ecology is, the meaning of what ecology is, just add marine to it. Simple as that. All right? And it is an interdisciplinary science that combines, okay, so you know the biology part is going to be the living aspect, the biotic aspect. So the abiotic aspect is all your physical sciences. So of course it looks into the geological aspect, chemistry, oceanography, geophysics, and statistics. So now that I'm playing around with these words, what other aspects of marine ecology can we branch out to? Okay, so these are some of the other major subcategories of ecology, which includes marine, okay? So some are quite general, but some are more marine related. So now if you play around the words with physiological ecology, so again, you know about how the abiotic, biotic factors, but now it acts on the physiological aspect, the characteristic of an organism and its adaptation. So in this case, more specifically, it looks at how an organism has morphological features that are able to adapt well to its environment. All right. And then when you look at behavioral ecology, it looks at, of course, the ecological aspects and the evolutionary dynamics responsible for the organism's adaptation. So technically, one has to have the morphological features in order to behave accordingly to its environment, is it not? All right. So of course, if you have gills are going to behave in a certain way towards the marine environment. If you have, like webbed feet, of course, webbed feet is going to be more useful in a particular environment. So it's those kind of things. How, when you have a feature, how do you behave? So if webbed feet, of course, you're going to pedal more, for example. You're not going to climb your webbed feet, are you? So it's like that. Then when you talk about population ecology, it focuses on populations of a particular species. Okay, so again, this is coming towards, so physiological and behavioral, it looks more specifically towards the individual of a species. But now you're going to expand a little bit. So population ecology focuses on the population of a particular species. If you're talking about community, then it looks into community of how species interact within the community of different species. Okay. Then you have landscape, which of course look into political landscape. Then you have ecosystem ecology, which looks into energy and material flow throughout the ecosystems. And then, of course, global ecology looks into the whole entire web of how every ecosystem interacts with one another. Cool? All right. Now, again, remember how I mentioned that ecology looks at the relationship of, the living aspect and the non-living aspect. So thence, I've broken it down into this pie chart. So you have the abiotic factors, self-explanatory, non-living component. Biotic is the living component. But let's look into the types of interactions that we're looking at here. So first, you have intraspecific relationships. So this looks into same species interactions. So with same species interactions, you have the typical scenario of, for same species, you have sometimes it's symbiotic interactions or competitions. Okay, can you guys think of any kinds of other relationships that looks into similar species interacting with each other, other than mating and competing for land and whatnot? What sort of interactions? It can be positive, it can be negative. All right, what do you think? Probably we can discuss this during our class. So now the next one is interspecific relationships. So the first one is intra. Now the inter looks into different species. Okay, so for different species, you look into cooperation, how one species works with another. This one can also look into competition. And then, of course, you have territorial divisions. So I must say, although some of these points are here, but even for same species interactions, they can be quite territorial as well. There are certain, okay, for example, clownfish. It's hierarchical, okay? So the dominant if you might, of course, you might all know that most of all will become females. But the main one is the female. And if that particular female dies, and then another mature male will actually take its place to become a female. So that can be a form of territorial division. But some are competitive in the sense that it's an area that they look after, like certain groupers. Groupers tend to be very territorial, so much so they actually sort of look after their own particular coral section. So that can be a different form of territory. So one is more hierarchical, one is more dominant of an area. Okay, so now when you're talking about interactions by a trophic level, in terms of its organization. So when we are looking into levels of marine ecological organizations, what we are talking about usually it's starting from the first level of an organism. So organism is looking to the individual itself, followed by the species, population, community, etc. All right. So an organism is an individual living thing, such as a sea star. Now I just want to bring to your attention, is organism and species the same thing? Question mark. I will ask this during your class later on, so keep that in mind. So, but for now, organism is an individual living thing, such as, in this case, a sea star. So think about it. Is an organism a species? Okay. Then the next one. Oops, looks like I've given you the answer. A species is a group of individuals that are genetically related and can reproduce fertile young. Okay, so what makes species different is that one is plural. Okay, so technically when you're talking about species, like for say you, me, and your friends, we are the human race, we are one particular species. Okay, so it can be a group of similar individuals. Whereas when you're talking about an organism, you're usually referring to one particular individual of a species. Okay, so in this case, again, that one particular organism is of that particular species. So don't get both of these confused. It's one of the same thing, but species can refer to a plural aspect. So one species can refer to many individuals or even just one. Now, when you're talking about population, population is a group of the same species that lives in one area. Okay, so now here you have a group of the same species that forms a population. Okay, so the thing is, I want you to think about this a little bit. A population is a group of the same species that lives in one area. By me highlighting this, can this be considered a population by right? The three of these are sea stars. Can it not be population? What do you think? I would like you to give me this answer tomorrow. I don't think so I have the next answer. So please give me an answer for this. Okay. Next one. A community is a group of different species that lives together in one area. Technically, I've given you the answer here, but again, I would like to see what your understanding is. Can these sea stars be considered a population? Please answer me that. A community looks into all sorts. It looks into sea stars, a different population, a different species of population. You're talking about crustacean zooplanktons. You're talking about phytoplanktons. Again, it has to be of the same species. All right. In terms of population. So within phytoplanktons, you can form different populations itself. So all of this forms a community. And then, of course, an ecosystem not only includes the organism, but now it starts looking into the non-living aspects. Okay, so of course you're going to be talking about the sediment that it lives in, the seagrass. You're going to talk about the water density, salinity, all of those other physical and chemical aspect. Okay, now when you're coming to biosphere is also known as is an ecosphere, and it is the sum of all ecosystems. Okay. And the global ecological system integrates all living beings and their relationships. Okay, so now, just out of curiosity, do you guys know what's the difference between lithosphere, geosphere, hydrosphere, and atmosphere? perhaps I'll ask you guys this in the next class. All right. So bear in mind, these are the question. Okay. The rest of the class, the rest of the notes are quite simple and straightforward. Now let's go specifically into the ocean abiotic and biotic factors. So how do abiotic factors and physical process impact life in the ocean? So the interaction of multiple biotic, abiotic, or physical factors determines which species can survive in a particular ecosystem. Is that straightforward? Which of this refers back to the ecological definition I was talking about? What sorts? The part that says it determines which species can survive in a particular ecosystem. Can you guys remember this? So if you're talking about species, it looks back into the morphology, correct? So you're looking into physiological ecology, behavioral ecology, and to some extent the population and community. Okay, but in order to understand the species and how it adapts, very specifically, it looks into physiological and behavioral. So that's what I'm talking about. All right. So now coming to this example, what are the sort of abiotic factors that can impact the health of the development of a coral reef? So if you see this example here, please note that I've taken this from Nat Geo, from some of their toolkits, teaching toolkits. So what it's trying to emphasize here is that within this coral reef system, it has all sorts of abiotic factors that plays a part into ensuring ecosystem health for the corals. So you've got wave action, you've got water clarity, you've got temperature, you've got tides, depths, substrate, nutrients, and salinity, and even oxygen. All right. So you notice how they actually drew different symbols to represent each keyword that is of importance. So I want you to bear this example in mind. Okay. So now coming to our activity for 20 minutes. Remember how I've asked you to be in groups of 4, so there should be 16 groups altogether. I would like you to define abiotic factors and physical processes that impact ocean ecosystems. So please collect in your respective groups for tomorrow. So ensure each group has the following: 2 or 3 index cards. Okay, so when you're talking about index cards, you may refer to your e-pembelajaran on your first lecture here. And what you would see is this, ocean abiotic factors. So please download that. And a copy of the ocean abiotic factors handout. Okay, so basically it's pretty much that, the same thing. And use the handout to create concept map vocabulary cards and learn the terms. Okay, so this is an example. If you're talking about salinity, what is the definition of salinity? Can you draw a symbol? Okay, so when you talk about symbols, say water clarity, so the eye shows clarity. Wave action, so it's wave. So draw a particular symbol. And what examples of how the term affects organism in the ocean? So meaning to say, if you're talking about salinity, obviously, in terms of the coral ecosystem, the salinity needs to be of a particular parts per trillion unit in order to sustain well. So you probably have to mention what are the effects of that particular physical parameter. I want you to think a little bit. So I wouldn't want to be giving you all the answers, otherwise it'd be too boring for you guys. So I wanted you to do a little bit of homework to read up about the index cards, because the answers are actually in there. But I also want you to give your own answers as to what are the examples. Okay, so I would like you to be in these following groups. So I will randomly call out any group for tomorrow, and you would actually have to present that table for me. The table pretty much looks like this, I think. So if you open up this, oops, oh dear me. Hang on. So if you look into ocean abiotic factors, you would have this readout. So you actually have to read out about this and find the clues and meanings from this in order to answer your questions. All right. So once you have downloaded that, you are expected to open this up. So remember how I mentioned about your abiotic and biotic charts? So you can fill up all of your answers here. Okay? So now looking up into orang sedang pre-recording lah. Masuk tapi diam masuk. Okay, just duduk sekejap. Okay. Alright, so for the next 30 minutes, you're expected to investigate the abiotic factors and physical processes of different ocean ecosystems. So for this activity, what I would like you to do is to be in your respective groups again, of 4 each, and ensure each group has a copy of ocean ecosystem descriptions and also ocean abiotic factors chart. So it's again referring back to these modules. These are the two. So what you have to do later is read the instructions on the modules and identify abiotic factors that affect the organisms living in the ecosystem your group has been allocated. So for this second activity, you have about Pacific Coral Reef Community. So there's a little short write-up about this. You have Open Ocean Community, and likewise, short description about this. And also Rocky Shore Community, where you also have another short description about this. So these are just intros, but I would like you to read up more about the modules based in your e-pembelajaran. And what you have to do is, again, these are the groups that has to prepare for rocky, coral, and open ocean ecosystems. I want you to read up on your respective ecosystem groups. And tomorrow I'll call you guys randomly to share your slide presentation. It doesn't have to be very complicated, just at least one slide or so for one activity each, and present your work as a group. Okay, and then following up from that, I want you guys to assess the human impact on abiotic or biotic factors, or even both. So what you should be doing is human should be listed as a biotic factor, and how can it impact the abiotic factors and processes of the ocean ecosystems. So I want you to think about this. And so following up from activity 2, I want you to identify and discuss different ways humans are impacting the abiotic factors in your assigned ecosystems. So ask questions. In what ways can it impact the abiotic system? So I've given a reference here, but this is just an example. I would prefer you guys to be a little bit more advanced and probably provide me with infographics and give me a short presentation about what you think, how do you think humans can actually impact abiotic and biotic factors and indirectly affect the whole ecosystem. So pretty much that's it for my class. I'm looking forward to your discussion tomorrow. So for the conclusion, basically it's this: marine ecosystems are comprised of the living organisms that have adapted to both abiotic factors and of course physical factors. Biotic factors, of course, you should know what it is. It includes any living organisms. Abiotic factors are non-living organisms. And ocean systems are, of course, impacted by abiotic factors, which I'll be looking forward to your answers tomorrow. And humans are biotic components of the marine ecosystems. However, we have a significant role to play in maintaining its health and its well-balanced ecosystem. So that's it for the first day of your lecture. Thank you very much, and I'll see you when I see you.